Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 3 of the Touring Car Championship for 2023. We're here at Singapore, the national layout. Singapore? I'll try that again. We're at Silverstone, not Singapore. Bit of a difference there, but we're at Silverstone for the third round of this season at the national layout as well. Just over 5 minutes to go in this qualifying session, currently being led by Alan Matthews. It's Alan Matthews on provisional pole here with a 58.1, relatively short lap here at the national layout of Silverstone, so drivers will have rather few opportunities to make up time in this qualifying session. So Alan Matthews currently leading 17 laps in, plenty of laps, plenty of opportunities though to try and get onto the top step on the front row of the grid for the first race. It's Will Inglis in P2 and then very close behind Matt Daly with only a 300th of a second difference between him and Will Inglis. So it should be a very interesting, very tightly packed field, one that will promote and hopefully encourage some very close racing, given that we have a very tight field indeed, but one that will certainly punish any small errors or misfortunes off track, so drivers will have to be very wary indeed that they keep the car pointing in the right direction. That is something that I actually have a little bit of experience with now at this track, this car and track combination, because on Sunday we hosted a little bit of a wet race. I believe it was only me who ended up getting some time on track in the end, unfortunately, but it was interesting to try out the Giulietta, which is something I haven't done for a little while now. But not only try it out, but try it out for the first time in wet conditions. That was very interesting indeed. One thing that I was made aware of is actually the super soft compound of tyre, not the optimum tyre really for drivers to be running in this session, or probably any session for that matter. Seems to be a different compound, not quite grippy enough, maybe it drops off as well, but it's the soft compound of tyre that drivers want to be running this evening. And in fact, for most of the running that we do, the soft compound of tyre will be providing drivers with the best grip, the best lap times for the race and for qualifying. We have 9 cars on the grid, make that 10 rather. Barry Clayton unfortunately not looking like he's able to get a lap in, which could compromise him in this race, but still, as I say, it should be a relatively close pack indeed this weekend. Alan Matthews then still holding provisional pole at this point in time. 4 minutes to go in the session. In fact, the entire field is spread by just 1.7 seconds. Very close indeed. And at this point, I imagine drivers will be going for a slightly lower fuel load than they otherwise would in some qualifying sessions, because it is a very short outlap here. Of course, pretty much your outlap is a full pace lap. You need to be carrying all the speed through the corners in order to get the tyres up to temperature for your next lap. I didn't find, in my running at least, any major drop-off, although I was running in different conditions, of course. So drivers will be making sure that they've got their fuel calculations correct and trying to run as low as possible, I presume, for this session. This being the national layout, of course, there isn't too much in the form of corners, which certainly throws a spanner into the works. A little bit of a different track layout than perhaps what we're usually used to in our touring car running. This track far more emphasises the straight line ability of the Giulietta WTCR, and it has certainly got plenty of that. Ample power, well into the 300s in terms of horsepower. I thought it picked up very nicely indeed, and drivers I'm sure will appreciate. It depends on how you, I suppose depends on how you have it set up, but I found that the front end was really nice in how it turned in, and there was just enough kind of play on the back end through some of the corners, like the exit of Luffield, like the entry into Maggots. It would just kind of guide you a little bit, kind of a bit of a squirrel on the back end. I know not all drivers will appreciate that, and probably much quicker drivers than myself probably disagree, but I quite like that. I think it helps me out quite a lot. Just to, it's not most confidence inspiring, shall we say, but it certainly is. It's certainly it's something that I appreciate, and it's a bit of fun as well. It always feels nice in the car. It feels like it looks cool from the outside. It probably doesn't, but any excuse for a bit of a slide, really. I'm all about that. So at this point in time, it is still Alan Matthews leading this session with a 58.1. Only 2 minutes to go now. That is 2 fast lap attempts if you're already out on track. Only 1 if you are yet to exit the pits. And we currently have 5 cars out on track, so it'll be Rob Whitney, Steve Knight, Rosie Oliver and Paul Millman who will be wanting to dive out of the pits to try and get another fast lap in. One final fast lap, and I imagine Alan Matthews, Willie Gliss, Matt Daly, Jack Hodson and Paul Brady will be hoping to try and improve on their times with a little bit of a tiny qualifying stint. We'll have plenty of laps under our belts in the race. We've already had plenty here in this qualifying session. 21 laps, that's pretty much unprecedented. I imagine this will be the shortest lap on the calendar. Now we see record speed trap for this session, 140 miles an hour, 140 miles an hour. And so that will be a bit of an impressive speed to beat if possible, but I imagine it'll, as you can see the bottom right there, 136, 137, 138 will be what we'll be expecting through the speed traps here. And you can see in the bottom left hand corner of your screens there is a predicted lap of a 58.1 for Alan Matthews. So he is trying his utmost to improve on his previous best, but at the moment it's looking like he'll be just about matching it, if not a little bit slower. He has Paul Brady up in front in the form of a little bit of traffic. He might offer some very slight assistance down the straights, but I can't imagine it would be too much given the low downforce nature of this circuit and the fact that we're just in touring cars. That won't be exceeding speeds of about 140, so there'll be a small gain on the straights to follow another car, but not much, and probably negated by having that traffic in front of you through the corners. Not that there are many here on the national layout. Seeing this layout actually harks back to one of my first experiences with Alfa Romeos in general, back when I was a young boy, which seems like a long, long time ago. It was not long after the release of Forza Motorsport, and it was one of the few games to have the Alfa Romeo Mito right after launch in it, as the timer hits 0 and most of the drivers come to the end of the session. And it looks like no improvements to be made here, so it is Alan Matthews who takes pole position for round 3 here at Silverstone. It is an Alan Matthews, Willie Gliss front row, Matt Daly and Jack Hodson on the second, Paul Brady, Rob Whitney behind, Steve Knight, Rosie Oliver, and then Paul Millman rounding out the field with Barry Clayton hopefully joining us for race 1. That is it for qualifying here at Silverstone. I'll join you in just a few minutes on the grid. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. We're here on the grid for race 1 of round 3 at Silverstone. It is Alan Matthews and Will Inglis on the front row here, of course, using the more traditional starting line on the national layout. So we're running down into Copse, the first corner. So it will be Alan Matthews who has to work a little bit harder. He's on the outside for Copse. He might be able to carry a bit more speed though, so we'll see how these two negotiate their way around what is usually a fast right-hander. Will, of course, will be as soon as we get on to lap 2. Very far down the start-finish line is straight is this finish line, but that doesn't matter now. There are 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. Alan Matthews gets a decent launch. No form of smoke there, so not too much wheel spin to report of. But it is Will Inglis who has the inside line here. It looks like Matt Daly also had a fantastic getaway. And he's still in first position is Alan Matthews. Will Inglis now very much more focused on defending against Matt Daly, because Matt Daly, a stormer of a start for him, was having a look a bit inside there, but no, Will Inglis heading through the exit of Maggots. Fantastic move up the inside, takes the lead of this race, and now Alan Matthews finds himself vulnerable to Matt Daly. Matt Daly now up into second position, and if Alan Matthews doesn't play his cards right here, it'll be Jack Hodgson very much putting the pressure on him in just a minute's time. There we see Alan Matthews having a look up the inside of Brooklands. A bit of a puff of smoke on the brakes as we lock up, heading through Luffield now. We are all making contact, 3 wide, heading through Luffield, and Rubbing is racing, so they say back onto the start-finish straight now, heading through Woodcote, as it is Will Inglis leading this race into lap 2 now. Matt Daly second position, Alan Matthews third now as we head down into Copse. Matt Daly having a look up around the outside. What a fantastic track layout this is, ladies and gentlemen. Will Inglis potentially going a bit too deep into the corner there. Matt Daly was a little bit more conservative, and that's allowed him to have a look up the inside, maybe into Maggots as well. Can't do anything just yet. As we break onto the exit of Maggots, we see the wheels jumping up into the air and the wheels coming to a stop as we go onto 3 wheels there. Fantastic racing from the top end of the field, though. It continues on as we head down into Brooklands. Once again, Matt Daly weaving across the straight as he has a look as to where he can make that Giulietta fit in order to try and overtake Will Inglis, heading through Luffield once again. The laps will be coming thick and fast, ladies and gentlemen. This is a fantastic layout on which to go racing. I am loving this so far. As we get on to the start-finish straight, it's still Will Inglis who leads this time around. Alan Matthews has maintained that third position. Hasn't come under threat from Jack Hodgson too much just yet, but still not an ideal start to the race for him. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the field, we're on board with Paul Brady at this point in time. He's in a relatively decent position here to just kind of relax and settle into the race. Hasn't got too much pressure from Barry Clayton behind, and isn't too close to Jack Hodgson to have to worry about making moves just yet. It appears to be that Matt Daly is a little bit further behind this time round. What can he do now as we run down the Wellington Straight once again? He had a much better run on the exit of Maggots, it appears, and as we head down towards Brooklands, he's got the inside line here. Who's going to be braver on the brakes? It looks to be that Matt Daly is keeping it in just as much as he can. He goes on as far as you would dare, really, with track limits. Is still hanging it around the outside here. Matt Daly, a fantastic effort all around. Both drivers here putting in a stellar fight through Luffield as we get back onto that start-finish straight once again now. Matt Daly is still going to be pushing as we head down towards Copse. He's going to have the outside if he can make it stick. It'd be very brave indeed if he can. And it doesn't look like any change of position there. Here we are now heading down towards Maggots once again. A big lock-up for Will Inglis there. Matt Daly couldn't do anything about that, though. Couldn't capitalise on it. Still in P2. The only difference this time around is that Alan Matthews is back in the mix as we head down the Wellington Straight once again, heading down towards Brooklands here. 3/10 separating Will Inglis and Matt Daly. 3/10 separating Matt Daly and Alan Matthews as we head through Brooklands. Alan Matthews, by the looks of things, no change of position there, or is there? No, Will Inglis still in the lead of this race. Bit of a timing error. Oh no, apologies, not a timing error at all. Will Inglis unfortunately for him, messed up the braking heading into Brooklands. It goes on the outside there. Apologies, the camera angle didn't make that quite so clear. And drops down to 4th. Now it's a battle between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly heading into that first corner. Though it is Alan Matthews who's got up into first position. Matt Daly 1/10 behind, still in P2, but now he's fighting a different Giulietta as he darts across the track to head in for the inside on the second pass of Maggots here. What can he do this time round, we wonder? Willinglis was rather undone by the pressure put on behind. Actually, I say rather undone. He's already, he's still in 4th, but he's already only 2.5 seconds off the lead of this race. Such is the immense battle that was going on in front of us. Heading into that first corner then, 3/10 separating Alan Matthews and Matt Daly, heading as much as he does off track. We'll call that within track limits, but it's only just about, it's within touring car track limits, shall we say, as we get back on to the start-finish straight once again. Willinglis looking a little bit further behind this time round, but still the battle between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly rages on. We're already 5 minutes into this race, 5 laps as well. What a track. This is phenomenal for these cars, and I think the drivers are enjoying it as well. Heading through Maggots once more. I think we could probably do another count of as for how many times I say Maggots and Beckett. Of course, not really Maggots and Beckett in its full completion, shall we say, because it's the national layout. It is very interesting as to just how much shorter this national layout is, because there's still plenty of long, fast straights, but missing the end part of the lap, the run down towards Vale, really does cut off a lot of time on this lap. It's less than half lap distance if my math is correct. As we get back onto the start-finish straight now, the gap has pretty much been maintained at the same rate throughout the past couple of laps now. 2/10 separating Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. A puff of smoke from the lockup once again. I have got my settings set perhaps a little bit extreme for the smoke generation, but it is very useful for determining as to whether a driver has locked up. Half a second now between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. This run on the exit of Maggots is oh so important because you're carrying that speed all the way down to Brooklands, and of course the run through Luffield, as it is on the full GP layout, is very important as well. You carry that speed all the way down towards, well, you'd carry it all the way towards the end of the hanger straight on the GP layout, but you carry it all towards the end of Maggots here on this layout. So it's very important to nail the few corners that we have on track. It can really cost you on the rest of the lap if you don't. These drivers, of course, much faster than I was only in my few laps that I got on Sunday. I was only really able to challenge for the 59.1s, 59.2s, although I'll break out my racing driver excuse and say I'm not quite sure what the track conditions were looking like. I'm not sure with the rain coming into effect and being on the slower compound of tyre, the super soft. The soft is quicker. I'm not quite sure how that affects things. They're my racing driver excuses anyway for my lack of pace. As we dive onto the Wellington Straight once again, it's an 8/10 gap. It's an 8/10 gap between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. Jack Hodson holding in there in 3rd. Willinglis, our once race leader, currently sat in 4th as we settle in to a bit more of a relaxed period in this race as the drivers get into a bit of a rhythm, settle into a more representative lap time, and start thinking about things like preserving the fuel or preserving the tyres as well. Speaking of preserving the tyres, as you can see they're running in 8th at the moment. It is Rob Whitney on the medium compound of tyre there, so that'll be interesting to see later on into this race. We are only 8 minutes in, of course, how that affects him. We will of course have a slower pace ceiling owing to just the inherent lack or inherent reduced grip on the medium compound of tyre. So it'll be interesting to see how this will play into his hands later on into the race when he should have a little bit more grip. I wouldn't have thought, unusually for Silverstone, that it was the most high energy track on the tyres because you're missing some important corners. And the temperatures shouldn't be getting too high as you have quite a few chances for them to cool down. So the medium does lose that advantage. Usually what you can find if there's a track which really exercises the tyres, say the Grand Prix layout of Silverstone, which you end up with a very hot front left tyre. Usually you could see that the hard compound tyres, such as a medium over a soft, might actually be the quicker race tyre, because it is capable of dealing with that heat a little bit better, holding the heat off for a little bit longer. But I'd be surprised if that were the case on this track layout, the national layout. I imagine the soft compound tyre should be good for the rest of the race, but we shall see. Maybe Rob Whitney has a few tricks up his sleeve later on. Currently he is battling Steve Knight. As you can see, actually has some damage on board his car there. Smashed windscreen, not sure what happened. I presume that was earlier on in the race, but currently enjoying a battle with Steve Knight as we head down towards Copse once again. Steve Knight has the inside line there. Rob Whitney a little bit further behind, looking for the outside. This could still be a decent battle here indeed, as we see Paul Millman also in the mix as well. Bit of a trio forming up here. Not only here, of course, we also have Paul Brady and Barry Clayton enjoying their battling as we head around the Maggots right-hander for the run down on, apologies, no, we are on Luffield at this point in time, running onto the start-finish straight now. And is Paul Brady, who just about wins out at this point in time, as he has to go around the outside through Copse. So let's see. In fact, no, he's already got the move done, has the position clear of Barry Clayton for the time being, but I am sure that position will be under threat for a few more occasions in this race. Steve Knight still leading Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney just ahead of Paul Millman there as we head through Maggots once more. The car jumping up onto three wheels. Bit of a Giulietta WTCR trait, that is, as we run down the Wellington straight now. Barry Clayton, a fantastic exit from Maggots there. Just about get a nose out in front. Not sure which car is quicker in a straight line at this point in time as we head into Brooklands once more. Has the outside for Brooklands. That does give him the inside, though, for Luffield. If he's played his cards right, has he just about kept a nose in front enough to get a decent run onto the start finish straight? I'm not sure he has. It looks to be that Paul Brady is going to be running onto the straight. No, he isn't, having the inside on the exit of Woodcote here. Barry Clayton up back into 5th position. Great bravery from Barry Clayton there. Excellent racecraft, just about keeping in the fight and eventually winning out as a result. I love watching these WTCRs at a closer camera angle. You can see just how much front camber they are running. They are all running fairly aggressive amounts of camber, as you'd expect with a front-wheel drive touring car. It just looks fantastic. In our previous touring car round, apologies, no, it wasn't our previous touring car round, it was Singapore, where Matt Daly looked to be running a lot of camber on his car. Someone who has just gained a position there is Will Inglis, back up into 3rd position, getting ahead of Jack Hodgson, and this will be Will Inglis's prime opportunity for redemption. Now, he's got clear of Jack Hodgson, who's been providing him a great challenge so far in this race. This is time to prove that Will Inglis does still have that race leading pace. He should be trying his utmost now to catch back up to those two front runners, about 1.5 seconds in front. Apologies, now about 5 seconds in front there. Meanwhile, Barry Clayton looks to have cleared Paul Brady somewhat here. The gap still not comfortable by no means, but Barry Clayton doesn't have his rearview mirror entirely occupied by Paul Brady now. Meanwhile, Matt Daly 1.5 seconds behind Alan Matthews. This has been a great race from Alan Matthews here. It's one thing to lead every lap, and while that is impressive as well, Alan Matthews, our qualifying top dog here, actually had to really fight to take this race lead back. The first few laps were certainly not easy. It looked like briefly Alan Matthews could drop off the podium, but after the unfortunate mishaps of some of his competitors and just raw pace, he's been able to be about 1.5 seconds clear of Matt Daly now. It's certainly an impressive effort so far. So just having a look at the moment, our quickest car out on track is actually Matt Daly, the car we are on board with at the moment, 58.1. That would have been a competitive time in qualifying. So we're seeing that fuel load now starting to get lighter about 15 minutes into this race, which probably suggests that the tyre compound not too much of a threat, too much of a worry in this race. That's all I see that as well. Unfortunately, Rob Whitney diving into the pits, his race one coming to a bit of a premature end. Willingless, meanwhile, about half a second up on his previous lap. He is looking for some good improvements as well. I think we're starting to see the fuel load get lighter. The tyres still in good stead. It could be some fast running coming up, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll see someone into the 57-second region in just a moment's time there. Matt Daly just about holding on to it there. I think that lockup unsettled the car ever so slightly, and the back end wanted to step out, wanted to drag him across the surface onto the infield there. Luckily, he did keep hold of it and was able to stay on the black stuff there, the tarmac, and was able to carry on. Did lose quite a bit of time as a result, though. Lost about 0.4 of a second with that one small issue. Actually, I think lucky that he didn't lose more, but still remains in P2 at this point in time. Now let's have a quick look at the championship standings as we see Matt Daly, another small lockup for him there. Matt Daly at this point in time leads with 93 points to his name, Willingless 76. So at this point in time, a good drive for our championship leader. Willingless potentially losing out here because Alan Matthews in P3 as well, 54 points to his name. He should be enjoying a relatively decent jump up here, although won't be getting any positions in the championship. Then we have Andy Craker in P4, unfortunately not here with us this evening. Barry Clayton in P5, should be some good points on the board for him with 38 points to his name. Paul Brady P6, 24 points. Rosie Oliver P7, 23. Jack Hodson, of course the sibling rivalry continues on, P8 with 21 points to his name. Then we have Paul Milman P9 with 10 points, and that rounds out the runners. We have Steve Knight P12 with 5 points and Rob Whitney P13 with 2 points. So some good points to be made for a few drivers here. Some changes in the championship order. Just under 10 minutes to go in this race now. And here we are back on to the... whereabouts are we? Apologies. We are heading through Maggot of Corse. I just had to find my bearings ever so slightly, as we see Paul Millman here very courteously getting out of the way. Has no obligation to do so, but is doing so very courteously indeed. And about a second and a half now between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. A potential late race charge here for the car in yellow. Let's have a look at how his times are currently looking. This point in time, our man in P2, a 58.5 on that last lap. Alan Matthews, a 58.4. Both drivers having very similar current pace, and both drivers, more importantly, arguably, having identical fastest laps here. These are a very close match indeed. Alan Matthews actually losing a little bit of time on that previous lap, so that helps out Matt Daly's cause somewhat. But it's certainly going to be an uphill battle for the number 63, Giulietta there. Heading down the Wellington Straight once again, about a second also between Will Inglis and Jack Hodson. It was, I thought, potentially a case that Will Inglis will be able to, once he's clear of Jack Hodson, be able to break away and catch back up to those guys running for P1 and P2, but that certainly hasn't been the case. Jack Hodson has very much kept Will Inglis honest in this race, and certainly kept him busy, so we'll see how this plays out in the final few minutes of this race, but also how it plays out in race 2, of course, our reverse grid race, where the top few grid positions are reversed based on the finishing order from race 1. That should add a bit of a twist to things, especially I really like the reverse grid races when we have such close fields like we do here at the Silverstone National Circuit, as we can see Will Inglis flashing his headlights to gently suggest that Paul Millman acquiesces and allows Will Inglis a bit of free space to clear Jack Hodson here. Potentially a bit of a slipstream maybe coming in the form of Paul Millman here. No, Paul Millman doesn't quite want to ruin his lap time just yet. He's going to instead wait till the braking zone of Brooklands to allow Will Inglis past. I'd love to know what button, Will, have you got that headlight flash mapped to? Because it's something I always forget whenever I'm setting up a sim rig. One of the few things you often forget. You make sure your pedals are all calibrated. You make sure your steering wheel is ready to go, and then you end up forgetting some of the important ancillary bits, like the flashing of the headlights, or as I found out in my wet race, the wipers. That was really annoying to try and race without wipers, but I managed. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how you guys have your rig setup. If there are any interesting quirky setups. I know Guy is running VR when it works. I think he's got a new laptop now, so it should be working again. I know Alex Smith, of course, has the ultimate setup in terms of its lightweight, portability, and just downright professionalism in the form of PS5 controller. I have a mix of Logitech G920 and Fanatec CSL Elite pedals, which are far too nice for my use cases. That I didn't initially intend on getting such. It was a nice little lovely Christmas bonus from work, that was. But yeah, completely useless for my needs, because I'm not a quick enough driver to need the better pedals in any way, shape or form. As we see a puff of smoke from the lockup there for Will Inglis. Matt Daly putting on a last minute charge here. 1.3 seconds now separating the two front runners. As we head back down the Wellington Straight once again, 1.5 seconds. So Alan Matthews managing this gap very well indeed. It's this stage now, if we still had a medium compound tyre runner, we'd be expecting to see a potential advantage, but it seems to be that all drivers in this race have managed their tyre wear very well indeed. Alan Matthews certainly has done so, hasn't fallen too much into the trap of pushing in order to try and break away from Matt Daly, only for Matt Daly to be able to catch back up later on in the race. He is maintaining that gap at a very, well, I was about to say very comfortable, but manageable 1.5 second interval for Alan Matthews there. So a great display from Alan Matthews so far in round 3. On that previous lap, it was a 58.4 for Alan Matthews, a 58.5 for Matt Daly. So at this point in time, unless something very unfortunate indeed happens for Alan Matthews, or if Matt Daly is able to perform some type of complete miracle, this could be a strong race indeed for Alan Matthews. Go aboard with the number 82 car now, just heading around Woodcote. Not too much of a corner to have to worry about negotiating, really, unless you're in the midst of an overtaking battle. Then you might have to be a little bit more careful. But it's effectively a straight line by that point in time. Not really too much to worry about. The gap actually building ever so slightly now. We are, of course, on the final couple of laps here. Puff of smoke once again as the brakes lock. 2 seconds between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. It's been a very strong drive indeed for Alan Matthews. It looked like it was going to fall by the wayside after a strong qualifying, a very close qualifying at that. But after some strong overtakes and the misfortunes of some others, Alan Matthews was able to work his way back up into the race lead and keep Alan Matthews, apologies, and keep Matt Daly at bay. It has been a great drive of Alan Matthews and will be incredibly beneficial for his championship charge, which of course continues on into the next round, or next race here at Silverstone, as we start what is now the final lap of this race. Impressive straight line speed on Alan Matthews' car. That could have been a differentiating factor here in this race. 137.9 miles an hour for Alan Matthews. As you know, Matt Daly's car was averaging about 136 based on his lap. So it was a strong showing from Alan Matthews here. I imagine the lower downforce setup is the one to go for. Probably a little bit less safe because, of course, the car will be squirming around through the braking zones or through some of the corners. But if you can hook in those laps and you are confident enough, having as little wing as possible will probably benefit you greatly here at this layout. It's certainly benefited Alan Matthews as he heads round Luffield and Woodcote for one final time here in race one. A very strong showing indeed, a thoroughly deserved race one victory for Alan Matthews. Well done, Alan. Strong drive, a very strong drive indeed. Matt Daly as well. Commendations have to go out to him, really. A very strong drive as well to come home with P2. Will Inglis, a strong recovery, keeping Jack Hodson at bay for the final few laps there. Rounds out the podium with a P3. Jack Hodson, not to be forgotten, of course, for bringing that fight to Will Inglis for so long, for leading him in that battle for most of this race, and then just about keeping him, or rather really quite keeping him honest, actually, not allow Will Inglis to escape and run up the road and fighting for that podium. It wasn't to be, unfortunately. Let's see what happens in race 2. Barry Clayton comes home P5, Paul Brady P6, Paul Brady doesn't come home P6, Rosie Oliver, our last driver on the lead lap, comes home P7, Paul Milbanbury classified P8, Stephen Knight classified P9, and then we have Rob Whitney to round out the 10 runners in this race. We'll join you, unless we have I think we have a victory celebration there from Matt Daly, which means, of course, we have to look at it. Oh, no, he's just weaving about in celebration. So as the drivers return to the pits, we get ready for race 2, the reverse grid race, coming up in just a few moments' time. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. We are on the grid with just under a minute to go. It is Rosie Oliver and Paul Brady on the first row. Then we have Barry Clayton, Jack Hodson on the second, Will Inglis, Matt Daly completing row 3, Alan Matthews and Paul Millman row 4, Steve Knight and Rob Whitney rounding out the fifth row of the grid. So it'll be very interesting indeed. Same track conditions, of course, but a complete role reversal in terms of the drivers. It will be quite interesting to see how some of the drivers work their way through the field here, as we're on board with Rosie Oliver's car as she's on pole position for this race. One of my favourite liveries on the grid actually is Rosie Oliver's car, the nice blue to green. That doesn't matter though, we have 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. A little bit of wheel spin from Rosie's car there. Good getaway though for Paul Brady and for Barry Clayton behind as we head into Copse. Paul Brady takes the inside there. Fantastic move up into the lead of the race for Paul Brady. Rosie Oliver dropping down to second and potentially third as well. Matt Daly meanwhile up into fifth. Will Inglis up into third. Great start for him. He makes contact with Jack Hodson. That is a very unfortunate incident there. He did recover from it, but Matt Daly got caught out in Jack Hodson's rush to really get the car facing in the right direction. And he's very lucky, it is Matt Daly, that he was actually able to carry on with some decent speed there. I can't believe that. He's back onto the Wellington straight. That looked for certain that car was going to be gone and in the distance. He has a smashed windscreen. I can't imagine the car is particularly happy with him, but he can carry on. That is the main thing. So it is now Paul Brady and Will Inglis fighting for the race lead. Rosie Oliver still not giving up just yet, which is what we like to see. The front three actually now having a slight margin to the cars behind owing to those issues halfway through the first lap. Will Inglis then up the inside heading through Copse now takes this race lead. Exactly what he wants to do in race 1. Let's see if he can try again and complete it in race 2 here. Building up a gap already as we head down towards Maggots now. Small lockup for Rosie Oliver there. Jack Hodson just behind. The sibling rivalry continues then as we see a little bit cleaner this around for Jack Hodson. Not caught up in any unfortunate incidents. Rob Whitney unfortunately retiring from the race there, so we're not going to be able to see his pace on the soft compound of tyre, unfortunately. As we see Alan Matthews having a look up the inside, heading in to Brooklands and up into 4th. Jack Hodson now down into 5th of results. So our race leader from race 1 dropping all the way down to 7th, of course, on the grid for the reverse grid. Now fights himself up in 4th already. That's halfway done. Well done, Alan Matthews. Let's see what else he can do. He's already now putting the pressure on Rosie Oliver as we head down towards Copse in just a moment. I'm not sure if that's a small lockup, but that's just the tyre scraping against the surface of the track, and the game deciding that it should be represented by a small cloud of smoke there. But up the inside into Maggots. A fantastic move from Alan Matthews. It has to be move of the day so far for me there. That was pure bravery from Alan Matthews up into 3rd position now. Of course, Rosie Oliver is going to try and fight that back, but I'm not sure if she can, because Alan Matthews certainly seems to have a great pace advantage at this point in time. Has a look up at the inside. Does Rosie Oliver. Is a bit too far back, though, I think, to make a proper move there. Remains in 4th for the time being, probably now more focused on defending from Jack Hodson, the car behind now. Meanwhile, Will Inglis in all this battling has broken away somewhat. If you are a follower of F1, you're probably thinking just out of the DRS zone. That's because he's now 1.5 seconds clear of the rest of the pack. This is exactly how we wanted race 1 to go. At least he's got it done here in race 2. Paul Brady now 1.4 seconds behind, just ever so slightly in front of Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews has the outside. Is he going to try and replicate that move into Maggots? Yes, he is, and he does so with ease. This is becoming a bit of an Alan Matthews favourite, I think, because he's now up into P2 as we get back onto the Wellington straight once again. Has he compromised his exit ever so slightly? He has. Paul Brady now diving back into 2nd position here. This could be an interesting battle forming up between these two cars here, because as much as they keep battling each other, Rosie Oliver and Jack Hodson behind are going to be catching and keeping up with them if these two cars do slow down. Should mention, speaking of catching and keeping up, Matt Daly, the yellow car that we saw flash across our screens as it veered off into the distance, now finds itself in front of Barry Clayton and soon to be putting the pressure on Jack Hodson. Great drive for Matt Daly, great recovery there. as we see Matt Daly, apologies, no, Paul Brady and Alan Matthews now. It's going to be Alan Matthews taking the inside line through Copse. He should have the outside for the first part of Maggots, but his favourite braking zone is coming up. Who's going to win out here as Alan Matthews has positioned himself well? Paul Brady, not really too much he can do from there. Rosie Oliver just about keeping it on the track there. She was very late on the brakes indeed. I thought for a second she'd be veering off, but no, still in 4th position for Rosie Oliver. Alan Matthews then this time round is on 2nd position. Apologies, is in 2nd position on the Wellington straight, but has compromised his exit once again. Has the inside now for Brooklands. Might not have it for Luffield though. It is still anyone's game between these two here. I think though Paul Brady losing time in the braking zone into Brooklands. Yes, that looks to be the case. And now we see that Alan Matthews up into 2nd position. Meanwhile, Jack Hodson not focused on the cars battling out in front, very much focused on keeping Matt Daly and Barry Clayton behind. This is a very tight field indeed. Only 8 seconds covering the top 8 on the grid here. Rosie Oliver then currently in P4. Jack Hodson and Matt Daly still side by side as we head through Copse. Matt Daly though looks to be as though he's just about edged out in front of Jack Hodson. Yes, he has, and is now probably more focused on Rosie Oliver out in front as we head through the right-hander, through Maggots once again onto that Wellington straight and heading down the track now. We are, by the looks of things, 4 wide there as we head down the Wellington straight. That's a brilliant image as we head into Brooklands once again. Matt Daly up into 4th and has dispatched of Rosie Oliver, losing 2 positions actually in that one braking zone. Bit of a disastrous lap for Rosie Hodson as it turns out. At one point, of course, battling for the podium, now finds herself in P6 under threat from Barry Clayton now. It just goes to show the stakes that are at play here when you've got such a tight field on such a tight, compact circuit. Well, it's not even that tight and compact, really. It's just short. And it's been a great track for some excellent racing so far this evening. On board with Alan Matthews, 4 seconds down from Will Inglis now. It must be said, Will Inglis appears to rather have this race under control now. As we see Matt Daly ahead of Jack Hodson, now putting the pressure on Paul Brady up in front, heading down the Wellington straight once again. Who had the better run? I think they are pretty much equal, if not slightly playing to Matt Daly's hands here as we head into Brooklands. He has a look up the inside. He tries to get that move done under braking on the inside. He does get that move done under braking overside over the curbs. Matt Daly into 3rd position. He saw a very small gap there, just about Julietta size, and said, "Thank you very much. I'm taking that gap," and up into 3rd for Matt Daly. Well done for that one there, sir. As Matt Daly now has his spot on the podium. I have a feeling he's not quite content with that just yet. Neither is Paul Brady though. Fantastic run through Woodcote. Hands the outside as we head around Copse once again. Not too much he can do though, unfortunately. Running around the outside of Copse does compromise you ever so slightly because you don't have the option to use Alan Matthews' prime overtaking spots on the track just further into Maggots there. So Paul Brady settles for 4th. But for how long we asked her, because there's a very close 3-car battle forming up here, as you can see. Not to be discounted though. Oh, Rosie Oliver and Barry Clayton. Very tight running here indeed. As we see Barry Clayton actually getting ahead of Rosie Oliver down the Wellington straight. That might have been into the braking zone or just before that even, but Barry Clayton now up into 6th position. Rosie Oliver settling for 7th for the time being. Now we see a slightly more comfortable lap for Matt Daly as we head down through the first part of the lap once again. The gap now stands at about 7/10 of a second, which usually would be a very close margin indeed and cause for great concern. However, as we've seen so far at Silverstone this evening, that is a relatively comfortable gap as it turns out. So while Paul Brady is still putting the pressure on here or there, Matt Daly can breathe just a little bit, a sigh of ease, and focus more on trying to set some fast laps now to try and expand that gap and potentially close up to Alan Matthews. I do slightly worry though, has that used a bit too much of his tyres? All that battling running up towards 3rd, has that taken some pace out of the car? We'll just have to wait and see, because this field is very tight indeed. There is plenty of action no matter where you look. In fact, the driver probably most comfortable at this point in time is probably Will Inglis. Will Inglis, with a still not entirely comfortable 3.5 second gap, has been setting some impressive laps and is settling in nicely to his position in the race lead here. In terms of lap times at this point in time, it is Alan Matthews who's actually the quickest car out on track with a 58.3, so he's doing his utmost to keep Will Inglis at bay and dispatch of Matt Daly. Matt Daly, meanwhile, is ever so slightly faster than Paul Brady on that previous lap, and in fact his best lap overall is about 0.4 faster than Paul Brady's. But the field is oh so close. Pretty much every driver, in fact every driver on the field, bar Steve Knight, currently running in ninth, I think a bit of a difficult race for him, has a fastest lap in the 58-second region, which is very impressive indeed. I can't remember the last time we've seen that actually, where all drivers are within 1 second of each other in terms of outright pace. It has made for some fantastic racing, it must be said. As Paul Brady is looking to improve on this lap, he tries to keep up with Matt Daly. That gap now nearly expanding to 1 second here. The two closest cars on track now are actually Paul Brady and Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson still within a shout here, wants that 4th position, so he's going to try and fight for it. He just needs to make sure he keeps ahead of Barry Clayton. See a bit of a battle forming up here. Paul Brady leading Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton, all separated only by about half a second, or covered by about half a second rather, as we head down the Wellington straight now, running into Brooklands in just a moment's time. Who's going to nail that braking zone? I can see Jack Hodson there. He's having a quick sneak peek at the inside line there. Very small gap indeed. They make contact as he passes, but a great move by Jack Hodson. Unfortunately undone through the rest of Brooklands there, as Paul Brady just about held on there and maintains 4th position. Fantastic battling going on between those two cars there, still pretty much side by side. Paul Brady wins out as they head through Woodcut, and it is now Jack Hodson and Barry Clayton battling it out as we head down the start finish straight into Copse. Then Barry Clayton looked to be like he had the utmost pace out of all three for a brief moment in time, runs around the outside, going a little bit wide actually at Copse, but actually losing out somewhat, is now behind Jack Hodson once again. 12 minutes to go in this race. We're at the halfway stage, 12 laps in, bit of a puff of smoke as the brakes lock up. Who is going to have another good run down the Wellington straight once again? It is Paul Brady dishing out that very slight slipstream. I can't imagine it has too much effect at all here. But it's going to be Jack Hodson once again trying his trick, having a look up the inside, under brake, and gets the move done. Washes out a little bit wide though through the rest of Brooklands, and that allows Paul Brady to swoop back past and take 4th position. Meanwhile, Barry Clayton not too far behind at all. Paul Brady going around the outside on the exit of Luffield and onto the start finish straight, once again leading this battle in 4th. Now Jack Hodson in 5th, Barry Clayton in 6th. Order not actually changing, although you'd hardly believe it given the amount of battling we've had. It's now Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson side by side as we head through Copse. Jack Hodson just about holds onto it, but Barry Clayton is being very brave indeed here in that neon yellow Giulietta. How much does he dare push as we head into Maggots now? Jack Hodson has the inside there, but didn't want to brave it. Didn't want to brave Alan Matthews' favourite overtaking position on this track for race 2, and instead stabs on the brakes, actually locks up as a result, and loses time throughout the rest of Maggots now as we head down the Wellington straight once again. They are still near enough side by side, but Barry Clayton has a very slight edge. He can't go on the inside this time around, can Jack Hodson, so he's going to have to remain in 6th for now. This time out, Barry Clayton has a tighter inside line around the right-hander of Luffield, and the order doesn't change. Paul Brady's probably a little bit more comfortable than he was on the previous couple of laps, because battling more focused on P5 and P6 there, but it is Paul Brady who wins out in this battle in the end, although I feel in the remaining 10 minutes this battle will continue on. 2 tenths separating Barry Clayton and Jack Hudson as we head down towards Maggot once again. Small puff of smoke from, in fact, all 3 cars there as Paul Brady takes that curb very tightly indeed, actually bounces over the curb and up onto 2 wheels. It's not a touring car race, though, if you can't see a car up in the air at a 45-degree angle, as Barry Clayton nailing the Maggot corner complex there, then side by side with Paul Brady, has the outside into Brooklands. That might give him a better run down towards Luffield. No, in fact, he has to stamp on the brakes, locks up as he does so, and I believe Paul Brady has had a bit of an off here. Not quite sure where he has gone. I can tell you, though, he's now behind those 2 cars he was battling in P4 just a moment ago. He's now in P6. Barry Clayton's worked his way up to P4. Jack Hudson, in all of this, remains in P5, just how he was a few laps ago. Already on lap 15 now. As we head round Copse once again, it's Barry Clayton leading this trio for the first time, as Paul Brady is darting out to have a brief look up the inside on the left-hand section of Maggots. A little bit too far back to do anything, though. A puff of smoke on the lock-up for Barry Clayton there. Let's see who wins out on this run down the Wellington Straight. Once again, the order has changed, so any setup differences might make themselves apparent this time round, as Paul Brady has a look up the inside there, under braking. Can he get that move done? Not quite sure just yet. I don't think he can, unfortunately. Was a little bit too far back. The order doesn't change as we head round Luffield once more. Still plenty of smoke. I'm not sure if that's actually lock-up smoke, though, or as we get towards the end of the race, the tyres wear out slightly. Perhaps the car is a little bit lighter, of course. That might just be tyre smoke from the amount that these drivers are pushing the front axles of these cars. Yeah, I think that is definitely the case now, as these drivers really are pushing on hard in order to try and maintain their positions, or at least try and at least gain a couple. In terms of pace at the moment, these drivers are, of course, slowing themselves down ever so slightly into the low 159s, high 58s in comparison to the rest of the field, which is in the low 58s, high or mid 58s. In terms of pace in between these 3 drivers, though, the fastest driver out of these 3, that accolade goes to Barry Clayton. Barry Clayton perhaps has been somewhat unleashed after getting into P4 in this battle. He's got a 58.6 as his best lap. Jack Hudson at 58.7 and Paul Brady at 58.8. There's a nice consecutive order there. That makes sense, and I think we're seeing that on track. So logical. But Barry Clayton potentially, now that he's got past those 2 cars that were once in front of him, potentially rest a little bit easier, start to push, maybe not towards Barry Clayton, but maybe not towards Matt Daly rather, but maybe away somewhat from Paul Brady and Jack Hudson, and take away some good points in 4th position. Speaking of points, let's have a look at how the championship is shaping up after the first race. I can say that, of course, Matt Daly still maintains his strong championship lead at this point in time with 111 points to his name, although it might not be the case, as we can see. Barry Clayton might not be maintaining his lead of this battle for much longer, as Jack Hudson has a brief look up the inside heading into Brooklands, but nothing he could do from that far back. Willingless with 91 points to his name. Speaking of the points tally here, Willingless 91 points to his name in P2. Adam Matthews closing that gap, though, in race 1, now 79 points to his name in P3. Barry Clayton, who leading this battle at the moment, 44 points, just ahead of Andy Craker and Jack Hudson in P6 with 33. Then we have Paul Brady just behind there in 7th with 32. So still plenty of change to come even at the end of this race, and as it stands, Jack Hudson will be improving ever so slightly that margin over Paul Brady in the championship standings, and Barry Clayton will be extending that gap to his fellow competitors. Barry Clayton now appearing to manage a still not entirely comfortable, but slightly more slightly more attainable, shall we say, or slightly more manageable 7/10 gap to Jack Hodson, the car behind now. I think that's 6/10 in some corners. Paul Brady seems to have dropped off somewhat. This battle now very much between these two cars for P4. Someone who we haven't looked at a while is Willingless. Willingless leading this race relatively comfortably now. Well, I say relatively comfortably, 2.5 seconds. Certainly not an insurmountable gap, especially if anything happens later on, but more comfortable than what we've seen throughout the rest of this race. That gap closing up somewhat on that previous lap. Alan Matthews had a strong end to that last lap, so that gap now stands at about 2 seconds. The gaps, speaking of gaps, closing up between Barry Clayton and Jack Hodson as we head down the start-finish straight. A little bit too far back to think of a move just yet, but certainly not out of the realm of possibility with the remaining time in this race. Barry Clayton managing this gap well as we come towards the end of another lap here. 20 laps in to this race, just 4 or 5 more to go. That should be a strong lap here for Barry Clayton, of course, as the fuel loads get lighter. His best lap, as you can see, a 58.5, and he's maintaining pretty much that pace. So I think the tyres not too much of a concern here at Silverstone this weekend, and instead the drivers more focused on managing a higher pace than what we otherwise might expect, and potentially managing their fuel load as well. Because of course, while these cars are very powerful, a couple of kilos here and there in terms of fuel load will certainly make the difference out of the corners, and could be make or break for your race, really. I think the setup margins are often an overlooked part of this sort of racing, especially with these with proper race cars here. You know, one small tweak can make or break your race, really, especially when we've got such an aero-sensitive track like we do here at Silverstone. Alan Matthews, and it's been a strong race for Alan Matthews in particular. I think he's well, as you can see, he's had actually, I'd argue, the upper hand on Matt Daly all weekend. Certainly did in qualifying. Was able to get past him in race 1, and has comfortably, through maybe not direct battling, but has comfortably kept Matt Daly at bay. I thought after Matt Daly worked his way up through the rest of the pack, we'd be seeing a bit of a charge, a bit of a redemption drive for Matt Daly. While it's certainly been impressive, another podium on the cards here, he hasn't quite been able to catch back up to Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews has been another strong race for him, and I think if we can get a few more of these throughout the season from Alan Matthews, he's certainly in with a shout of taking home a championship. He's certainly in that top end mix, likes of with the likes of Matt Daly. He's he can certainly fight for a decent spot in the championship standings here. Likewise, Willingless should be aiming for the same thing, really. He's unfortunately already this season and in the previous seasons as well often gets caught up in some some unfortunate events, often out of his control. Sometimes maybe just not having the race weekend he would like to, but either way, if he can iron some of those out, he's certainly in with a shout in this championship, as well as he has done for a few times in the past now. Certainly got the pace, just needs a few more weekends like this. And Matt Daly, it's quite an unusual weekend for Matt Daly, actually. This will be, if you asked any other driver, I think it'd be quite a good weekend all round here, but I think Matt Daly, even after taking a race win, would be perhaps slightly disappointed with apologies, no, didn't take a race win, of course. I think he'd be slightly disappointed with just a couple of podiums to come home with. So hopefully, for his sake, he's able to come back stronger for the next round. And I think for the championship stakes, maybe he's not, and we can enjoy some close battling even further into the season than we usually do. As we see, this will now be the final couple of laps for this race. Now 2 seconds clear of Alan Matthews, managing that gap very well, just like Alan Matthews did in the previous race. Speaking of managing that gap as well, what was once pretty much no gap at all to speak of is now a comfortable gap for P4 for Barry Clayton here. Interesting, the order has completely reversed itself. It was Paul Brady leading this three-car battle, then Jack Hodson, then Barry Clayton. But after a few laps of battling with Barry Clayton, who came out victorious, now in P4, about a second and a half clear of Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson, well, I'm sure disappointed, is probably still quite happy that he was able to keep the car on track and didn't lose out too much after that battle. So it looked like it had no stakes at all. And then we have Paul Brady a few seconds behind there. I think his pace just dropped off towards the end of the race, which is a shame for him, because he certainly was showing some great pace elsewhere in the race. Though, as we're on board with Will Inglis for what is now the final lap of this race, and I think we'll stay on board for what will be a bit of a parade lap for him. Has been a strong drive for Will Inglis. Unfortunately, didn't quite work out the way he would have wanted to in race 1, but he certainly redeemed himself and made up for it in race 2. As we head now down through Maggots. And it is just so impressive. I've really enjoyed commentating on this track, actually. It's short and sweet, but it provides great racing as well. As we head into Brooklands, we're already most of the way through this lap, would you believe it, heading through Luffield. Once again, doesn't have to push the car too hard at all at this stage, just focusing on bringing it home for the final 10 seconds. Now, it's certainly made up for race 1 after a strong qualifying where he unfortunately faltered against Alan Matthews, and faltering again in race 1. He makes up for it by taking the race 2 victory. Congratulations, Will Inglis, for a strong drive here in race 2. Alan Matthews as well, a strong weekend all round here, a race win and a P2, a strong haul of points there for Alan Matthews. And Matt Daly certainly can't be too disappointed as he slides his way through Cops. The Matt Daly drift has become a bit of an end of race celebration for him. I very much enjoy it, especially given it's a front wheel drive car. And Matt Daly rounds out the podium there with P3. Barry Clayton comes home after an immense battle midway through the race with P4. Jack Hodson with P5, and Paul Brady coming home P6. Rosie Oliver, after starting this race on pole, unfortunately with such a close field, ended up home in P7. Then we have Paul Millman coming home P8, and Steve Knight rounding out the field will be coming home in P9 there. So that has been a very enjoyable weekend's worth of racing here at the Silverstone National Layout for round 3. Join us next week in the RSS Supreme, the single-seated championship, for a round at Suzuka, as we have Alan Matthews sliding his way across the line once more. I'm sure those tyres looking somewhat like bricks now, and Matt Daly doing the same as well, in fact, and Will Inglis having a bit of a crash on the start-finish straight. But that rounds out this evening's running. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next round.